All right, this is a Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, joined by my co-host Brian Solomon. How's it going?
It's going great, Al. Happy to be here as always.
Yes, and for the first time on the show, Mr. Warren Hayes, PWI contributor, podcaster, and for the sake of this show, he's going to be our Japanese wrestling expert. How's it going, Warren?
Pretty good. Thank you very much, guys, for having me. It's a pleasure to join you two fine gentlemen to talk about pro wrestling. And so I'm looking forward to this. It'll be fun.
Yes, this really the first time. Wow, I didn't realize it was the first time. Wow. Okay, I feel like we've had you before. Wow.
No. No, I guess, by association because of the lists and whatnot, since I work on the women's list and maybe my name gets thrown around and, I just feel old hat essentially.
Yeah. Sorry. It's taken so long to have you on.
No, that's fine. Hey, listen, it's the anticipation that makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. Just before we started recording, we were talking of all things about, what was it called? Le Brunch De Patterson.
Pat Patterson's brunch. Le Brunch De Pat Patterson back in the day in the 80s on WWF TV, localized for the Montreal market, right? And we were talking about how in lieu of Piper's Pit here in Montreal, in French Canada, we would get Pat Patterson sitting down with a pro wrestler in front of just a plain backdrop with the WWF logo hanging in the back and a bowl of fruit. And they'd call it the brunch.
Boy, talk about an inside joke. Good grief.
And then, and the whole gimmick, which was hilarious, right? The whole gimmick is that he would have the wrestler on. Obviously, the wrestler didn't speak a lick of French unless he got on Dino Bravo or the Rougeaus or Rick Martel. Aside from those, the wrestlers wouldn't speak a lick of French. So he'd have them on, sit them down, and ask them questions in English. And then he'd say, all right, give me a second. I'll translate for the viewing audience, which is fair, right? The thing is, the twist is that if he would be very complimentary and very honest about the heels' responses, but the baby faces he'd have on, he would just lie about what the response was and would completely bury them. He'd have like Tito Santana or Lou Albano on. Lou Albano he'd have on, and he'd say, okay, thank you for being here. You look wonderful today, Lou. And then he'd look at the camera and say in French, he looks like a bum. Look at this. Look at the stuff he has dangling off of his face. It was fantastic. And it was so popular that even people who didn't watch pro wrestling knew what it was. Wow. I swear, I had members of my family who just like never watched pro wrestling. My older aunts and uncles, everyone knew about Pat Patterson's brunch because he'd just flat out make fun of English speakers, which was very a la mode back in the day as well here in Quebec.
So there was no Piper's Pit then on those broadcasts.
We never saw Piper's Pit. Wow. We never ever saw it.
So how about all the angles that would happen on Piper's Pit?
Except for some significant big angles,
Hogan,
like
Andre,
the coconut
and the trophies and all that.
Exactly. If there was something really big that happened, or like Hogan and Andre the Giant, all this, the really big stuff we'd see like in clip format, and then someone dubbing over what's happening. Like essentially that's what we'd see. But the run of the mill Piper's Pits, we'd never see them.
Yeah, the closest equivalent that I had growing up in New York, where Spanish language TV is still really big, and we have Telemundo and Univision, was I guess Superstars would air on Monday nights, and you can find some of this stuff on YouTube too. And the promo segments were the Spanish announcer whose name I forget, but he was just a little guy would interview somebody in Spanish, in English, and then translate it. And it was always super awkward. And because, you'd have a big boss man or something get really heated up, and talk about hard time and all that. And then wait, and he just kind of stands there patiently as he translates everything. But I don't remember much in the way of any angles, except I'm remembering Tito Santana was at the Spanish commentary table once and got attacked by the Islanders. I think this was like 87, 88. But that's the only, So like, I imagine as they did with the Rougeos, and Frenchie Martin, they'd lean on the handful of Spanish speakers a lot. So every episode, I mean, you'd think Tito was a much bigger deal than he was come the late 80s or early 90s for as much promo time as he got on the Spanish language superstars.
Well, have you ever seen what they did in Southwest Championship Wrestling in the 80s? This is the furthest they ever went with it, because this is what it used to be on USA Network before the WWF. And they would do, at the same time, they would record an English language version of the show and a Spanish language version of the show, because they were aired in Texas, where there's big Spanish speaking population. That's where they originated. So like literally you'd have the English speaking commentator on one side, interviewer, if they were interviewing a wrestler. You'd have the Spanish speaking interviewer on the right side, and they would be holding two microphones, and the wrestler would hold two microphones, because one would be recorded for, like, it would go into the Spanish feed and the other would go in the English feed. And while the English speaking guy was asking questions and the wrestler was, saying his answers, the Spanish speaking guy would be translating it in real time. And
would you get that if you were watching the English version? Would you be hearing the Spanish guy?
Yes. So it was absolutely chaotic. So you couldn't really hear, like in the English language version, you could hear the Spanish guy, but he wasn't on mic. You just heard like him because he was standing right there. It was really weird. But then I'm assuming if you were watching the Spanish language version, you'd hear him, but the English speaking guy would be in the background, his voice. And the result was just chaos. It was like the Tower of Babel, just chaos.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine they couldn't patch in the sound directly to the guy? They actually had to have another physical microphone.
Look it up.
That's hilarious.
They're holding two microphones. Yeah,
that's funny.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, whatever it is, 40-something years later, and this is still kind of an issue. I mean, how many times have we talked about language barriers being a barrier to get wrestling over to a certain demographic or a certain wrestler over. So yeah, it's incredible seeing. And then over the years you've had, I mean, were there equivalents of this in Quebec? Like standalone show? Well, I'm thinking like Super Astros. Remember this, Brian? This now 25 years ago or more, where they launched a whole kind of separate brand, right, of Spanish language wrestlers and their own angles, and it never really worked, because the American fans wanted to see the American. Yes, right, yeah.
She was discovered there, and I think that was also right. That was like late 90s, and Victor Quinones from Puerto Rico was actually like the point man on that. He was producing it. I think he was the commentator, and yeah, it kind of flopped. I think that they had a working relationship at the time with the IWA, which was a Puerto Rican promotion. I think they're still around. I'm not sure. And they were doing talent exchanges. It didn't really work, but on the flip side, you would go to these IWA shows in Puerto Rico, and like Kane would show up, and The Rock and the Dudley Boys. I mean, you saw who was getting the better end of that deal,
Yeah, but inevitably, I mean, I remember watching some of those, and if you were, I guess it depends where you were, but certainly if you were in New York, and a Spanish language speaker, and there is what was then WWF show on TV, you didn't want to see, Perro Aguayo or whoever they would like.
That's why
you wanted to see The Rock and Steve Austin. So yeah, and also like none of them were really featured on any of the other shows or pay-per-views or anything like that. Anyway, we're way off the rails. I'll try to bring it back. Hey, this is all.
I could talk about this all day, Al.
Easily.
And well, I guess the one kind of common thread through all of this is talking about international wrestling, and the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the May 2026 issue, just out, is our annual spotlight on Japan, other stuff too. The World Heavyweight Champion CM Punk on the cover, a feature put together by Kevin in here, just kind of looking at Punk's return to WWE. Now it's a few years in, and how he's really changed the shape of WWE's main event scene. But a lot of coverage here about Japanese wrestling. It's what we wanted to have Warren on to talk about. Get the issue over at pwi-online.com. You have a feature in here, Warren, about New Japan and the House of Torture and Evil. I've been wanting for really since the beginning of the year to spend some time talking about New Japan, in part because of what a big deal Tanahashi's departure was in January, and kind of the latest reset, right? Well,
latest is the right word. Latest is the right word. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I'm far from an expert, but even with my somewhat limited kind of following of Japanese wrestling business, it is apparent that since the departures, retirements, kind of even before Tanahashi retired, he had very much kind of become a part-timer. Wasn't and not necessarily in how much he worked, but sort of how he was featured. But it's all to say we're pretty far removed from the days of Omega and Okada and Tanahashi and Naito, and when there was kind of this embarrassment of riches at the top. I think some of that shows up in the metrics, right? So what is kind of the state of Japanese wrestling and of New Japan at the moment?
Oh boy. Okay. Well, let's start with New Japan instead of
yeah, I know it's a lot of right
with the entire country, because you could argue right now. Okay, like the big stroke you could say is there's only really one promotion right now in Japan that is really thriving, like really doing good business, metrics all pointing up, and it's Stardom. That's that's really the only promotion that's having tangible growth. And
are they outdrawing New Japan?
Well, they're not outdrawing New Japan. No one outdraws New Japan, but Stardom is outdrawing, let's say, Pro Wrestling Noah, which a lot of people would consider maybe like the second promotion in Japan right now, right? But they're easily outdrawing them. They're outdrawing All Japan, DDT, even the other Joshi. Well, I mean, it's not even comparable. The other Joshi promotions like TJPW, Marigold, they're miles away from the success that Stardom is having right now. So, like, the landscape right now in Japan is not great. It's not great, but at least there's like this one promotion here that's really finding its footing throughout it all, which is good. And but circling back to New Japan specifically, you're right. These golden years, the golden decade of New Japan, the 2010s right up to the 2020s, like pre-pandemic, were just, like you said, an embarrassment of riches. When you just mentioning all the people who were there. You mentioned Okada and Omega, but then you have Tetsuya Naito on top of that. You had Hiroshi Tanahashi. You had an up and coming Will Ospreay. You had Kota Ibushi. You had such a solid, thriving undercard of guys like Tomohiro Ishii, like Katsuyori Shibata until he got hurt. It was a preposterously excellent time to be a New Japan fan. And then, well, things started to, like, post-pandemic has been a struggle for everyone in Japan. I mean, it's not something that's singular to New Japan, but their woes continued when some of their top guys started to leave, right? You had Kazuchika Okada, who took a big deal over there in AEW. You had Will Ospreay, who took a deal over with AEW as well. You had Tetsuya Naito, who for years at this point, his body had been begging everyone to just, like, don't use me anymore, but he was legitimately the biggest draw of in the company. He was extremely popular, and he still is today. And then you had the writing on the wall that Hiroshi Tanahashi was not going to last forever either. So there was a lot of expectations from New Japan fans that because all around the same time, I'm bouncing around a little bit. I apologize. I'm organizing my thoughts. At the same time, there's this crop of young lions who came back from excursion, who came in from a very good class, and a bunch of guys who were extremely talented. I don't want to take for granted here. Does everyone understand the excursion process for New Japan?
Yes, but I don't know that our listeners do. I mean, basically,
Okay.
it is the notion of taking a young wrestler and kind of sending him out for seasoning, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Typically, they'll be sent away. Once their training is done in the dojo, they'll have a send off match in Japan, and because essentially all they are up until that point is kids running to the ring. They got their heads shaven, black tights, black boots. There's no personality. They just come in, they wrestle. If they wrestle one of the main card guys, they lose, and they go back and they train some more. That's essentially what the life of a young lion is. And then at the end of their training, they get sent a lot of times overseas. They'll go to the UK, they'll go to Mexico. Some people will come to the US, though it's a little trickier now than it used to be. But guys like Kazuchika Okada had his excursion in Impact back in the TNA Impact. Evil had his excursion in the US as well. So there's so they go off, like you said, they get some seasoning, they learn other styles, they try to incorporate that into what they know, and then they come back. And when they come back, that's when they get a personality, that's when they get an entrance, that's when they get entrance music. Then they become like a full-fledged wrestler. That's essentially what the excursion thing is. So you had a bunch of guys come back from this excursion, right? Like Shota Umino, like Yuya Uemura, like Ryohei Oiwa, who had his excursion in Japan, which does happen as well. But and then you had also talent that been building up, like Bolton Oleg from Kazakhstan. All these guys that everyone was sort of excited to see were like, oh, they have this exciting crop of new guys, of wrestlers that are just going to be that are on the cusp of greatness, right? That we're just looking forward to see what they're going to do with them. And for a span of 3 years from the moment they came back to now, New Japan has not committed to pushing any of these to any of these guys. Outside of maybe right now, because they've decided to go to push to get behind one of the guys, at least Yota Tsuji, who's currently the IWGP heavyweight champion. Outside of him, they've waffled, they've flip-flopped. They haven't committed to making any of these new guys feel special, or to give the audience a reason to go like, okay, this is the guy we're going to get behind. It's baffling booking, quite honestly. And I'll give you a really good example. I think it was 3 years ago. 3 years ago, 2 years ago. I'm sorry. Time is wibbly wobbly for me sometimes. In the G1 tournament, right? There's a block that's set up where all the new guys are in there. All of these guys that I'm mentioning, all the young guys, they're all in this one block. And they add in that block Senada, right? Who is who is a fairly well-known New Japan wrestler, a veteran at that point. And at that moment in time, he is also IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. They put him in the block with these young guys, and he beats all the young guys.
Yeah.
So and we understand he's the champion. Don't get me wrong. Everyone understands. But then what's the point of booking
hearing that, as an American wrestling fan, a WWE fan, not that unusual, right? I mean, that is the kind of thing that you see American bookers, I mean, wrongfully do a lot, but were the expectations that you wouldn't see something like this out of New Japan?
When you're looking at the landscape and you're realizing Tanahashi, not even back then, right? Before we were even talking about the retirement run, Tanahashi, not what he used to be. Naito falling apart. You still had Okada at that time. Ospreay was still hanging around, but they were on the verge of leaving nonetheless. The baffling question was, why wasn't office, why wasn't the booking committee, creative, whatever you want to call them, why weren't they focusing on immediately then and there starting to create the next generation of stars? Because essentially what happened is, you know, I will give them this much. Osprey and Okada leaving was probably unexpected, right? Because they were still healthy, they were still going. But at some point, the office has to have the realization where it's like, well, these guys are going to ask for a lot of money and we won't be able to give it to them, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this was the challenge that I know Ring of Honor was facing for years and years before they were purchased by AEW, was that they would build a crop of top talent and inevitably they'd be, you know, picked apart. And I remember talking to Kerry Silken and Joe Koff over the years. And they knew you knew that was kind of the point, was that like, yeah, we're sort of a feeder system. And we know that if we are successful, it means losing our talent. And because of that, there was always somebody in the pipeline. And I think Ring of Honor did a really good job in their heyday of always kind of refilling the top. But it does seem like New Japan's really struggled in the last few years to do that.
And it's continuing today, right? So, you know, Tetsuya Naito had to leave New Japan. There's a lot of rumors. He left last year, right? And that was a surprise. No one was expecting that. But he had to leave New Japan. The rumors are that because it was that the rumor was that he needed time off to really heal up. Because if you don't know Tetsuya Naito, that man is broken down. Like he was one of their top talents in the 2010s. Today, like he's, you know, he walks bow-legged and it's just it's a disaster. He can barely hit his finisher without extra help from his opponent. So essentially, he needed to take some time off, lots of time off to heal up. And the rumor is that New Japan wasn't quite into that. I'm like, no, we need you because you're the top draw. We put you on a card. People pay money to come see you. They buy your merchandise. So his contract was up and he was like, well, I'm going to go off and do other things then. I'm going to go off. And so that sort of took everyone by surprise. And this is within the year that Hiroshi Tanahashi is having his retirement tour. So everything's coming to a head, and now everyone's like, well, now their back is against the wall. You know, after Wrestle Kingdom this year, well, New Japan's back is against the wall now. They have to push new guys. They have to. They have no choice. There's no one left. None of the stars of that great era. Sure, Hiroki Goto's still there. Sure, Tomohiro Ishii is still there. Okay, that's fine, but they are also getting up there in age as well. So the people that did carry that era are gone. There's no superstars in the company anymore. This is now they're finally getting behind a guy like Yota Tsuji, and they're doing other stuff with you can see that they're trying out other things. Like there's a tag team right now called the Knockout Brothers, which have a lot of buzz right now in New Japan because they're just so different and have a really compelling energy. It's just like, okay, finally some life to this place type of thing, right? So they're trying some stuff out. They brought in Aaron Wolf, who is a gold medal judoka, Olympic gold medal judoka that they brought in. He's a household name. Everyone in Japan knows, like he's a guy who goes on the morning shows type of thing, right? And they bring him in and it makes a big deal, a huge splash, superstar because of him. New Japan is on broadcast TVs, getting some terrestrial broadcast television coverage for the first time in decades, all because of him. And they can't even book him, right? But that's a whole other story.
Yeah, I've heard they've been beating him, right?
It's legitimately preposterous where they're, you know. I can understand that the guy he literally started training wrestling last year, right? And this is a guy, it's not like he's not a celebrity hire. This is a guy that they brought in under contract and a guy who watched pro wrestling as a kid and is like, I want to do pro wrestling now. This is what I want to do. So they're bringing him in. They have him train throughout the year. Like they keep him off of TV for months last year, right? Just to have him train to debut him at Wrestle Kingdom. He has a very well received match, great presentation at Wrestle Kingdom, and then after that, just like he was losing to the House of Torture all the time, which is well, not all the time, but he lost his title to the House of Torture. He's always involved with the House of Torture. The people he hangs out with are the lower mid carders. What would be a good example? A good example would be, let's say you bring in a big, okay, let's say Gable Steveson had worked out. Just bear with me here. Let's say Gable Steveson had worked out and you bring him on to Raw and he's hanging out with, the Alpha Academy.
Right.
Okay. That's the equivalent. That's the kind of people that Aaron Wolf is hanging out with. The lower card guys where you're like, why is he doing this? Why isn't he hanging out with the top people, with the big guys? Why is he having like real feuds and whatnot? There's problems creatively. There's problems with the booking in New Japan. It's been going on for years. Gedo has been who is typically referred to as the booker, and it's pretty much common knowledge that he's the guy who books. He booked the Golden Age. Like he was the guy in charge in the 2010s. And many times it's like, he was lauded as an excellent booker. There was even a meme in New Japan circles where it's just like #trust in Gedo. It's just, don't worry what's going to happen. Gedo has an answer for everything. Well, Gedo doesn't have an answer for jack these days. In my opinion, there has to be a change on that level. There has to be something that there has to be some kind of mix up, because I don't know what it is. Is it complacency? Is it just being out of touch, not understanding what's going on? I couldn't tell you, but the company's in a rough spot. This is one of the, like, for the past couple of years, I've been like, this is not a good time for new viewers to jump into New Japan, because it's for fans, it's a disappointment, but it's such a weird period where you're just like, I don't know who I should get behind. I don't know who's who. It's very bereft of life these days.
Yeah. Brian, kind of big picture, what is the importance of a healthy New Japan? What does New Japan represent globally? And historically, and it's one of the things that's come back to bite them, right? Is if New Japan is able to develop top stars, there's a special credibility in being a top star in New Japan. And again, the flip side of that is that now eyes are on you, and maybe you get the American promoters coming after you, and that's why you end up in a situation like this. But again, what is the importance of a New Japan being healthy?
Well, I mean, I think it's important because professional wrestling is and should be a global enterprise. Obviously it started as a business over here, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know how big American pro wrestling companies are in Japan. Like, I don't think that, I mean, Warren, compared New Japan compared to like WWE, how are they viewed over there?
Well, WWE has a presence, like people know who they are, but, and they run the occasional, there's an annual tour that they do, right? They go and they run, like, I think it's Osaka Joe Hall or Sumo Hall. I can't remember which one. I think they do maybe a night or two in Korakuen, and that's pretty much that's just about it. But
But what about like in terms of TV and all that stuff?
Oh, there's no TV. There's no
really?
No. There's barely any Japanese wrestling on TV to begin with. So
that's a good point. But I mean, like, do they have like, can they watch PLEs on Netflix and that kind of thing? Like,
sure.
Is there any of that?
Sure, there's some of that, of course. The thing with the Japanese with the Japanese is that they're very protective of their own of their own stuff to begin with,
Right.
and it's not just a wrestling thing either. It's just I
Sure.
think there's something very cultural about it. So it's one of these things where it's like, well, you guys are coming in with your with this offer, but we already have the buffet. Thank you for the meal, but we already own the restaurant. It's fine. And it's the same thing with AEW too. It's like they did the conjoined show last year after Wrestle Kingdom, the Wrestling Dynasty. Do not confuse with Wrestle Dynasty. The day after Wrestle Kingdom last year in 2025, and it drew, but not crazy numbers in the Tokyo Dome. What was it? I think it was 14,000 that they drew for the show, when you consider that they did 25,000 in the Dome the night before for the New Japan exclusive show. Well, it goes to show you that the maybe American based companies don't necessarily have that same type of influence.
And that's part of why it's important too. Yeah, because I mean, wrestling in Japan traditionally has been, everybody knows what a cultural marker it has been. So I mean, to carry on that tradition, obviously, I mean, we also all know that it's not what it was in the Baba and Inoki days in terms of like a cultural presence. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't even think in the 2010s it was at that level anymore.
No.
Of just like, pop cultural relevance. So I mean, so it's important to keep it healthy, because I mean, I don't know about now, I'm not as versed enough, but there have definitely been many times where, from a global perspective, New Japan Pro Wrestling, for example, just because they're still relatively strong, could be even considered the number 2 pro wrestling company in the world from a world perspective, and maybe even sometimes number 1 if you're only looking at their own localized universe as opposed to globally. But so I mean, like that's important. You can't just let it die on the vine, obviously.
If there wasn't that level of protectionism, or I don't know if it's protectionism or just appropriation by the Japanese of their pro wrestling heritage, if you want to call it that way, WWE would have made inroads, like serious inroads, a long time ago. But it's a tough nut to crack, this one.
How important do you sense that the relationship with AEW has been? Because clearly they've leaned on AEW a lot in the last few years. When you think about their last couple world champions before Tsuji, you had Takeshita, who was an AEW wrestler, who not on loan, he had a contract over there too, but featured more prominently here, and then Moxley for a while. And it did feel like after losing Omega and Ospreay and Okada and some of those top guys, they really leaned on AEW a lot. But it sounds like it's been sort of mixed results for them.
Mixed results is putting it mildly. Okay. So I think when the relationship started, I think both sides were very excited, mostly because we would have the possibility to get some matches that we otherwise had never been able to see, right? It's preposterous when you think about it that it took so long for us to get Bryan Danielson versus Kazuchika Okada. We eventually got it, and we know why we didn't get it beforehand, because of politics and silos and whatnot. That's fine. But I think that got a lot of people excited. But now that the dream matches, I think, have all passed, now that the relationship has been normalized and there's a lot of fluid talent exchange, now I think I think at least from New Japan fans, there's a lot of annoyance where they're like, where they want they want less AEW presence in their things. I think the main catalyst of that is the departures of Okada and Ospreay. I think that was a big turning point for a lot of New Japan fans, where they're like, look, New Japan is not a feeder system for AEW. Yeah. That's not what we're here for. We exist. There's been a promotion here for decades. we should not be feeding people to AEW. And that created a sentiment of resentment that exists today, that is still very prevalent and that is still ongoing. You know, when you see a guy like Gabe Kidd, right? Gabe Kidd last year, 1 year ago, a little more, like around Wrestle Kingdom last year, when he was gearing up for his fight with Kenny Omega, he was Mr. New Japan. He'd come in, he'd have the big lion mark on his trunks. People would cheer for him. He'd have these rah promos where he's like, New Japan is, I am New Japan, and so on and so forth. Now look where he is right now. A year later, and he's in AEW. Everyone's like, okay, the cycle, ultimately the cycle never ends. And that creates resentment. And the resentment is real because in the Yota Tsuji right now, as the world champion, but even before, but now specifically that he's their top guy, he's been using that in his promos. Like, you know, he's not an idiot. He knows this is a good way to get over with the crowd. I'm the top guy. I want to, to unify the fan base, get the fan base behind me. So he comes out and he says, yeah, this world championship here that I have, I'm not going to defend it internationally. They can come here, but I ain't going over there to wrestle them. They're going to come and wrestle me here. And he just so happens to be a double belt. He has also the global title in New Japan, right? Which is the secondary title. And he's like, oh, I'll defend the global title, internationally. Sure. But if you want the real deal, you got to come fight me here type of thing. And he's had promos where he's said, it's like, I'm going to defend, where he straight out say, I'm going to defend New Japan against AEW, that kind of thing. That resonates with their fan base. And it's really, that's where the relationship is as far as the fans go. It's a lot more confrontational than it once was, where it was like, where it felt more like talent exchange. Like it's just like, hey, open borders, let's go. Let's have some people over. Now it's a little more contentious. New Japan has to be a little more careful, but you don't get that feel. You don't get that vibe from American fans, from North American fans, where it's just like, hell yeah, let's keep this going. The level of disappointment that people had with the Forbidden Door show last year.
Yeah.
Hey, there's not
the novelty wore off. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
And yeah, like
but
you talked about, there's no
on.
more dream matches or anything like that.
But that's that exactly. I don't think it's a question necessarily that the novelty wore off. It's just like, it's more of a question of, to compound my point from earlier. Who are they going to send?
Yeah.
Who are they going to send to Forbidden Door? They're not promoting anyone. Like I mentioned Ryohei Oiwa to you too. Do you see Ryohei Oiwa in your head?
No.
Can you picture him? Which is fine. Don't get me wrong. You know the name, but you can't picture him. He's a great kid, like a terrific wrestler. I think his ceiling is huge, but they're not doing anything with him. So what are you going to do? You're going to send Ryohei Oiwa to challenge for the AEW World Championship? No, that doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense.
I think another thing that illustrates it, and you kind of write about it in the magazine, is for so many years now, and again, I think it's one of the problems, is these guys would become top stars in New Japan, and then the American promoters would start calling, and then you'd lose your top stars. Now the latest top star to become a free agent, Evil, right? Former world champion over there too, has been a free agent for a number of months. And you might know better than I do, but I don't sense, everybody's knocking down the door to sign Evil. And I guess there's been some discussion of whether he'd be a good fit in WWE, but I
think he's going to do great. And personally, and I think he's going to do great if he goes to WWE.
But they'd have to establish who he is. He doesn't get, announced at the Royal Rumble and get a pop.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
yes.
And I don't even know if in AEW he does. I mean, I just don't think he's has that kind of reputation.
Yeah. I wouldn't think in AEW either. I don't think there's as much. I don't even think there's as much crossover between New Japan fans and AEW fans as there once was, especially around the original Forbidden Door. And especially since the rumor has it that Tony Khan never liked Evil. That's why he never booked Evil on any of the Forbidden Door shows. It was like, I just don't like the guy. I don't want him.
Yeah.
so that was a closed door. But yeah, look, Evil, Evil is he's for years he's been a very controversial personality because of who because of what his character is, which is a guy who just cheats to win. That's essentially it. Like, and you know, maybe American listeners right now are like, well, okay, so he's a heel, sure, but like in the puro environment and like in Japanese wrestling, you know, it's the pure, it's the presentation of wrestling is a lot more sports based. It's a lot more pure. It's competition. It's proving yourself. It doesn't it does not behoove anyone to fall back on cheap trickery to get wins. That's not necessarily how it goes. And that's where the heat with Evil in the House of Torture is that like they'll barely lift a finger in a match, you know, and instead they'll have a clown car of interference where you're going to have people running in with wrenches and, you know, spitting whiskey mist and have push-up bars, and, you know, they'll ring the bell, you know, to trick the babyface into thinking they won the match. They'll turn the lights out in the building, like, you know, just a cavalcade of nonsense. And in the environment of Japanese wrestling, that gets really grating, really annoying, really quickly. And that's what Evil's gimmick has been for a while. And you know, which is why he sort of turned into a polarizing figure. But this is outside the fact that he's a terrific brawler. Like this guy as a physical, beefy dude who's going to throw you around and punch and slap you and kick you around. He's tremendous. He's a very, very good brawler. It's just like he was completely lost in this interminable gimmick of just going in there and cheating upon cheating until you finally get the win.
Yeah. Yeah. So a perfect fit for WWE. they love
But I mean, even outside of that, when I said that he was going to do great, he has the right instincts for WWE, if that makes sense. You know, a guy like Katsuyori Shibata, for instance, never work in New Japan or in WWE. And I mean, that just wouldn't work out. But Evil has the instincts. I think he's very charismatic. Personally, I think he's going to do well.
He's not a young guy, right? I mean, he would he be like north of 40 now, or
is he north of 40?
I feel like I've at least heard of the name for at least 10
years
now.
He's not a young guy. I would say late 30s, more than into his 40s. That would be my instinct. I'll let you check since you're checking already.
39.
There you go. Okay, so we were. Let's say we were both right. So you know he's still at a prime age, and this is a guy whose bump card is not full. I'll tell you what, you know. So he's got a lot to offer still. If you
last thing on Japan before we switch over to WWE, you mentioned it at the top. What is Stardom doing right that, you know, their sister or brother promotion for that matter is doing wrong?
They're pushing new and exciting, fresh talent.
Yeah,
go figure. Go figure.
Well, I guess it's easier when the whole company is younger, right? I mean,
well, okay. So yes, like in Joshi wrestling is naturally skewed younger. Like that's just how it goes. Their wrestlers start when they're like 14, 15 years old, 16. You know, there's wrestlers who have debuted on Stardom at 16 years old. That's not uncommon. Like that's pretty frequent. And there's a lot of time the age of retirement then is also, you know, the ceiling is a lot lower as well. So it's not necessarily something that's out of the ordinary, but Stardom did kind of have a situation where, we're always pushing the same people. You know, you had Mayu Iwatani, you had Tom Nakano, you had these wrestlers who had been around for a while, were always at the top of the card, and you're like, all right, can we mix it up a little bit? Can we start doing other things? And it's interesting because once the ownership of the company switched from Rossi Ogawa to Bushiroad, and specifically New Japan, the company made a complete about face and started like focusing on new fresh faces, and they struck gold with Saya Kamitani, where they decided, Saya Kamatani, a wrestler, started off as a babyface, good little wrestler, nothing wrong with her, entertaining, but, kind of like another face in the crowd type of thing. It's, okay, she's very good, but, we've seen this before. She does a heel turn, everything completely changes. The heel turn was like lightning in a bottle, and she's been fantastic, and she has been the face of this turnaround for Stardom for the past 18 months now, I'd say, where she's been at the top of the company, the World of Stardom champion, and she's fantastic. Like, she's got it all down, the presentation, the ring work. She's legitimately awesome. And then in the meantime, what are they doing? Well, they're building up other new stars from beneath to come in and challenge. I don't think there's like right now, the big question is who is going to beat Saya Kamatani? Like that's the one, right? And so they're building new wrestlers, trying out new people. But from my point of view, is like, don't beat her yet. If she's drawing, if she's putting, the proverbial butts in seats, keep her there. Yeah. Keep her there for as long as you need. If it's a 2-year reign, it's a 2-year reign. If you're setting box office records for the company and attendance records, and you're getting featured on television, stay with her for as long as you need, kind of thing. But she's been a revelation, and there's just been, and it's something that we've also seen in other promotions as well. For a while, Pro Wrestling Noah had a bit of buzz with Ozawa, which is another young guy that was pushed and super charismatic and really a great pro wrestler. And they were on an uphill. Not an uphill battle. That's not what that means, Warren. They were on an upward trajectory. That's what I was looking for. And then he got injured, and then Noah got in its own way with its booking as well. And then, that's another story. But with Stardom, and Saya at the helm, it's just been absolutely fantastic. They're doing the best business in the history of the company. 2025 was the best year the company has ever had. So they're absolutely doing something right. And I think that's all it is. It's push fresh faces, new faces, exciting people, good wrestlers. I don't think the formula is all that difficult, quite frankly.
You wonder whether they fall into the same problem where they become a victim of their own success, and their roster starts to get just fleeced by American promoters. And it's already happened to some extent over the years. And then you've seen AEW pick up a few, and even WWE. But that speaks to the importance of just always having that pipeline, right? So you can absorb that when you lose somebody, you've got somebody to move into that spot and take their place. Yeah. Anyway, a great conversation. You could read more about Japanese wrestling and Warren's coverage in the latest PWI, which is our spotlight on Japan. Let's talk some WWE. Brian, we're in what should be the busiest time of year, or most kind of anticipated time of year for WWE and for wrestling in general. Now, the next big show is WrestleMania. Elimination Chamber is behind us. We are on the road to WrestleMania, and yet I feel like the headlines coming out of WWE is how kind of, and I don't want to overstate it, but just speaking personally, how stale the product is, and I've been as much a WWE defender the last several years as anybody, and I'm the first to tell kind of lapsed fans and non-fans, come back. This is some of the best WWE I've seen in years, creatively, the work. And I think there's been a sustained enough time where I can't say that anymore, that it is really concerning. And just in the last few weeks, which is when you would think WWE would really be banging on all cylinders, and that's historically what you've seen. Even when the product is weak, you see them kind of put their best foot forward in the build-up to WrestleMania. And I don't remember it being weaker than it is now for many years. And I'm seeing so many mistakes and just things that I haven't seen in years. I mean, one small example, it really sort of feels like Vince McMahon is back in a lot of ways. I mean, the leaning on comedy, whether it's Danhausen or Kit Wilson or Johnny Gargano planking all over the place, or
I love Danhausen.
Sure,
Danhausen's great.
any one of those on their own is fine. I think Kit Wilson's has been fun too, but I think it just speaks to a shift in direction when you're seeing so much of it, and other stuff that very much feels like Vince. The lack of focus in the main event scene on the SmackDown side, leading it to WrestleMania, where now we're a month away, and there still isn't a clear main event, and it feels. Officially, it's Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes. I don't know that I buy that. And it very much feels like we're going to get a 4-way, maybe even a 5-way with Sami Zayn and Randy and Cody and Jacob and Drew. Am I forgetting somebody? I think that's it. So just kind of a mishmash. Over on Raw, I'm not loving the Seth Rollins stuff and 50 guys in masks running around the ring for no purpose. It's just because it sort of looks cool. And even something as important as Roman Reigns and CM Punk, which I think is a fine WrestleMania main event, when they had their big angle, the kind of promo war in the ring a few weeks ago, and they go the your dead father route. I was just I rolled my eyes. Because it's just so lazy, and we've seen it a million times with Cody and Dusty, and I'm so unimpressed lately by WWE, and again the timing couldn't be worse, I would think, and there are some metrics that show that I'm not alone. I mean, they are really having a hard time moving tickets for WrestleMania, and at the time that again the product is kind of stale, they're charging more than ever that barrier for entry is higher than it's ever been. So I don't know. Am I exaggerating things as far as the state of WWE right now?
Well, I think we have to remember that those big boom periods, they don't last.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been the way it's been, especially since WWE has been a national company. I mean, it's a few good years, and then things kind of settle down again. And I think that's where we are. I mean, they started ramping up and getting hotter, about 6 years ago at this point? So, I mean, it makes sense that now we're on the other side of that. It never lasts long. I think they were benefiting by the fact that, especially coming out of the shakeup with Vince McMahon, they had some really hot kind of stories that could carry them and that they could get as much out of as possible. So you had the bloodline, you had Cody Rhodes and his story, and they tried to keep things going with what they thought was going to be, a great thing, which was the Cena heel turn, and like to sort of like keep things interesting. And now we're at the point where I think, I don't want to say they've run out of ideas. That's dramatic, but like they're at the point now where it's like, it's not as easy to keep it going, and they have to really put their heads together. And even with the last vestiges of whatever Vince related creative are gone at this point, and they really have to put their heads together and go like, okay, this is harder than we thought. How do we actually keep this going year to year? And I think that's where we're at right now, where sometimes you could actually feel the kind of like unsureness of it all, the uncertainty on a week to week. I'm not saying that didn't happen with Vince. I mean, obviously it was notorious, but like you could feel it now. You could almost hear the wheels turning of what do we do next? What do we do now? What's supposed to happen? And I think that's we're seeing that now with the lead into WrestleMania. I think with Punk and Reigns, it's smart to have that as your main event, like as I like to call it, your real main event. Let's be honest here with this 2 main event nonsense. Your real main event, and not have Cody be a part of that for the first time in years. It does make sense, because as much as I think Randy and Cody will be a great match, and there's an opportunity if it stays that way, like you said. if there's an opportunity to do some interesting things there. And they do have a history, which I think should probably be played up more with it, together. That's not your night 2 main event. So, I mean, like, it takes the pressure off.
I'm not sure it's your night 1 main event,
But what I'm saying is it could be a night 1 main event. It takes a little pressure off those guys, where you've got Roman Reigns versus CM Punk, which in my mind is like a legit WrestleMania main event. It sort of was spoiled a little bit by doing their dumb little 3-way last year with Seth Rollins shoehorned in there, because now it feels like it's sort of been done already, but not quite. So, I mean, I don't think you're exaggerating. I think this is the weakest WrestleMania shaping up, I would say, in the last 5 years.
Yeah, the other challenge with Punk and Roman, and I do think it's probably the best match they could put forward, so I don't have a problem with it. But it's another. It's two baby faces theoretically, right? I mean, tweener or what have you. But the point is, what I worry is that between now and Mania, all we have, and we got this to some extent last year, is every few weeks they get in the ring and they get a microphone and they just kind of jaw at each other, and that's fine. And Punk in particular is great at it. I can listen to Punk talk all day, and Roman's very good too. But there's just a sameness to it, and so I wonder, is there an angle? Does there need to be an angle? In the Vince McMahon days, somebody would hit somebody with a car. Something would happen with a car, in the back, or a truck or something like that. And I'm certainly not asking for that, but I also wonder, like, well, is this it? I mean, between now and Mania, are they just going to kind of take the microphone and talk about each other's dads and talk about Paul Heyman and I don't know. I mean, I don't know that gets me hyped up for a WrestleMania main event.
Well, I will say this, and I'm always the one that criticizes these big angles where it just becomes, here's the angle. Two guys are going to angrily talk at each other like week after week after week after week. And I'm not saying you have to hit somebody with a car, but there are other ways to develop a story. There are ways to do it in the ring. There's ways to tell stories in the ring, have things happen in the lead up, other matches, things like that. And on that front, I will say that involving the Usos now is probably an answer to that. They don't want to have the two of them, and I don't even know if they can, given their, especially Reigns' limited schedule. This is a way to sort of keep it interesting, get the Usos involved. It teases, is the original bloodline getting back together, which I think could be a very real possibility by WrestleMania time to do. We're actually at the point now where it's almost like bloodline nostalgia. It's like when they reunited DX. I think that could happen. With Punk, I'm a little confused because I know there's the whole tweener thing, but he's kind of being positioned like you would almost think they're shaping up for a heel turn. What with he's insulting a guy in a really serious way that people really like, and that strains things. The stuff with the Usos, I mean, I don't know if that was the plan, but how they envisioned it, but he came off very heelish, the way he was like lecturing them, and then they finally just like laid him out, knocked him to the ground, and I don't know if you could hear it, but he's saying, it was off mic, but he's saying like, I deserve that. It's almost like they are, let me put it this way, if they're not building towards a heel turn, then I'm kind of like confused as to
a heel turn for Punk.
For Punk.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I liked the Usos angle better than the Punk Roman angle because I did think there were more layers there, kind of calling out Roman for, and I think this is fine booking. I mean, sort of saying like, essentially the promo was, well, we're all treating him as a babyface, but he never did anything to redeem himself. He was a jerk. He was a jerk to you guys. Right. So why all of a sudden are we cheering him?
But it's one of those things, and we know this very well. This is classic wrestling psychology. They'll do these heel turns where you're like, this guy has a point. He's not wrong, but by vocalizing it in this way, he comes off as a whiny complainer, and people don't want to hear that. Yes, we know, you're right. Okay. But he comes off in a heelish way, even when he's speaking the truth. Like, how many heels do that? Where it happens a lot, where it's like they're trying to point out the hypocrisy, but they come off as the jerks for doing it. That, I mean, that's, at least that's the way I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I do wonder whether that is an ace up their sleeve to play. And when you think about what kept WWE hot for the last few years and what they would go to, it was these meaningful turns. The first one being Roman, whatever it was now, 5-6 years ago. And that really changed their fortunes. And then Cena last year, they were able to build a WrestleMania off of it, even if it didn't pay off. But so I wonder if that's kind of what they're looking to now, whether it's Punk, whether it's Cody. Cody might be they might be looking at a more obvious option, even though Cody has kind of signaled some reluctance to do it. Warren,
that could be to throw people off the scent.
Yeah, yeah. Warren, from afar, I mean, do you see anything in any card that WWE could play that could really turn things around? It looks like one route they might want to, or they might be considering, and this is very much out of like Vince McMahon's playbook, is just a celebrity route. Now that there's talk of maybe some involvement with Tom Brady at WrestleMania, and do they look at that as just kind of a short-term injection of interest? And I don't even know what that would be. I mean, I don't think he would wrestle, but there's talk of maybe him seconding Seth Rollins in a match with Logan Paul. I don't know.
I that's hilarious. I hadn't heard about that. I didn't know that was something they were considering. Look, as someone who watches the goings-ons in WWE from afar, I'm just as clueless. I don't see what the path is, quite frankly. Like Brian said, wrestling is cyclical. That's just like how it's always been. And I think, look, they had a tremendous 4 or 5 years, right? And I think we're just like on the down scale of that, which is just completely normal, right? That's about the length of the Monday Night Wars on top of that. It's like we seem to think that it was this decade-long thing. It really wasn't. It was just a few years, and it's fine, So I'm not all that surprised about it. I can't help but think oftentimes, because I'm very critical of old Paul Levesque on my end of things, on my podcast and things. I can't help but wonder, like, okay, to me, again, as someone who's somewhat removed as an observer, right? I feel like this is truly Paul Levesque's first WrestleMania where he has where everything that goes on it has been created, fingerprinted by him. Previous WrestleManias, since he took control, he had the bloodline, he had Cody coming in, and these were all Vince creations, right? These were all Vince things. Now the bloodline, from what I understand, is a shell of what it used to be. It's not even considered, in the main event situation anymore. Cody's lost a lot of steam. I'm not saying that he's done. I'm just saying he has lost a lot of steam. All of these big time things that were carrying the company now sort of have very naturally, because it's the nature of the business, just lost their sheen. We're ready for something new. And I sort of look at this and as I wonder if this isn't an indictment on Paul, who hasn't really come up with anything, and I feel is maybe trying to pull together the last remnants of what worked previously, like you said, like bringing the Usos back and getting some bloodline nostalgia into that. Hey, remember how much you liked the bloodline? Remember that? Maybe it's just me. I don't know what you guys feel as more consistent watchers, but I feel like he's maybe, I don't know if he's up to the task, I guess.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to the New Japan conversation, and I think you're touching on something that is very real, which is you look at the guys who are top guys who have headlined WrestleMania and they've leaned on a lot, and it's these very established guys: Cody, Roman, Punk, Seth Rollins, and for whatever reason, a lot of those guys are. I mean, some of them are very much still in the mix, but here we are at WrestleMania season, and it does feel like they're struggling to fill gaps. Like, well, who we've got Cody, but we don't really have a super interesting opponent for him. And this reminds me a little bit of WrestleMania 2000, which is in the absence of that one match that is surefire WrestleMania main event, just throws much stuff in the soup. Fatal 4-way with a McMahon in every corner, remember?
Right.
And that's very much what the SmackDown main event scene looks like right now. And it does feel like they are just in the absence of quality, let's just throw quantity. Because I don't buy that it is Cody and Randy. I guess it could be. And I don't know that that's better. I mean, I'm sure they could deliver a fine match. But it does feel like, and I think it's fascinating, and you're not wrong, Warren, to say that Cody is kind of like right now really sort of flat. He won the world title, 5 days ago, something like that. I mean, he just won his third world title, but you're right, and it speaks to just kind of a flatness. Brian, what did you make of the world title change? And do you think they got the belt off of Drew too quickly? Does it feel like a panic move?
It sort of makes me lean towards what you're saying, that this is not the final form of this main event, because I'm thinking one thing I'm thinking of is, unless there was a panic, what in the world was the point of even having Drew win it? I don't understand what that, because my initial instinct was, by the way the match ended, was thinking, okay, now they're going to spin him off with Jacob Fatu or something, and
which might be it, yeah,
and that'll be the WrestleMania match. But in that case, that even more underlines, like, why in the world would they even have bothered putting the title on him, unless they were saying, oh, let's see if it works, let's see if it sticks, maybe he'll go into Mania as the champ, maybe he won't, which it feels very sloppy. The only way it would make sense would be if it did lead to him being put back in the match and it's a triple threat or something. Because, yeah, otherwise you're left thinking, well, Cody could have just carried it all the way to Mania. What was the point of this? So yeah, it is a little troubling.
Well, there were reports at some point that they were looking at Cody and Drew at Mania. I think Dave Meltzer reported that the plan was maybe a Hell in a Cell. So just a gimmick match to kind of freshen it up. But it just does feel like kind of grasping at straws. And this is just the main event scene. Never mind fleshing out 2 nights of mid-card and undercard. And there's like nothing. I mean, I think both the women's matches feel kind of flat. Stephanie and Liv, terrific workers. I'm sure they'll have a fine match. But it's like, is anybody been clamoring to see Stephanie McCarron and Liv Morgan? I don't know. And then Rhea Ripley and Jade Cargill look great on a poster, both of them, right? But as great a worker as Rhea is, I think a lot of fans see that match and say, like, oh, you're going to take one of your best workers and put her in kind of a difficult position where she's going to have to carry her opponent, where we've seen Rhea in the last several years against the best of the best, whether it's Charlotte or Bianca Belair or Io. And now, sure, again, from marquee value, how it looks on a poster looks great, but does anybody have high hopes of that being a particularly good match? And it just from there, when you see them just kind of randomly pairing up Damian Priest and R-Truth as a tag team, and looks like they're getting a tag team title shot at WrestleMania, it really does feel like kind of the and not to make too much of the undercard, but it does feel like kind of the wheels are coming off the bus, and there's just not a lot there. Finn Balor turning babyface, presumably working against Dominic Mysterio. That's fine. That's something. Seth Rollins, I guess, is going to work against Logan Paul in kind of a featured match. none of this is getting me all that excited.
I'm very quickly like I'm fascinated that they didn't run Rio, yeah, well, the tag team. No, but I'm fascinated that they're not running Rhea versus Io at WrestleMania again.
They've done it. I mean, I guess that's a problem. They've done it a lot.
Well, I mean, look, I think back to the Evolution match, right? The Evolution 2 match that they had, which in my very humble opinion was on the way to be one of the greatest matches in WWE history. Those two were having a spectacular match until the run-in. But at the end, that's a whole other conversation for another time. But it's the kind of thing where you know, and you guys know this is a good booking tactic. Leave them wanting more, right? So I'm sitting there going, hey, you know what? The smart thing to do for WrestleMania for these two ladies would be to give them another match, and at WrestleMania and just have them tell them as they're going up, go out and steal the show, go, and they'll do it because they're capable. Like you said, Rhea's a tremendous worker, Io's a tremendous worker, but. You know, look, they're going with Jade and Rhea will make sure that the match holds together, so it'll be fine. You know,
yeah, I mean, I could see wanting to put Rhea in a world title match, but I don't think it would have been the worst idea just to do her and Io in a featured grudge match, tag team partners that you know fell apart, all that, and get somebody else to work with Jade and you know. A mid-card match somewhere on night one or something like that.
Because the difference here between Jade and Rhea and Io is that two of these three wrestlers have worked big matches in big spots in the past.
Yeah.
And are able to deliver in those spots. I don't think Jade is there. I don't know if she'll ever be there, but I'm a lot more skeptical when it comes to Jade's capabilities in that kind of spot.
I guess we're getting Becky probably and AJ Lee in a rematch too at Mania. Again, none of this is doing all that much for me. And yeah, I mean it feels. Do you have any question, Brian, that you know this will be a successful WrestleMania? At the end of the day, those buildings are going to be full, whatever it takes, right? I mean, even if you know, you're super discounting them in the last few days. There's not a question that it's going to be packed.
It's getting harder to do. That's the thing. Yeah, it'll be packed, but it'll be packed because they have to scramble and figure out ways to make sure it is. Whereas in the past, I don't think that was the case. You were turning people away. So, I mean, you know, like we said before, the company's in a position today where it's almost like, you know, they could remain profitable in their sleep. They could run a test pattern every week and they'd still find a way to make, you know, billions in rights fees and all this crap.
But I feel like
they're at, but
I feel like that's what, you know, people are saying about WCW around 98, right?
Because the thing is, if you lean on that too much over time, yes, then things start to like collapse because if they get to the point where, you know, Netflix says this isn't worth it anymore or whatever, or even in the current landscape, it's not out of the realm of possibility. You're talking about WCW that the day may come one day where Endeavor says, yeah, we're going to just kind of like put this in mothballs for a while and maybe like sell some merch and it'll be a legacy brand, or we're going to sell it to, it's not out of the realm of possibility, or we're going to sell it to somebody who's going to do something similar and they're going to turn it into like, you know, some nostalgia thing. That's not out of the realm of possibility, but that's a long way down the road. But it does show that it's not, you know, magic. Like they actually do have to work sometimes. You saw some of those WrestleMania like seating layouts where, I mean, Al, we remember the days when WrestleMania would sell out in an hour and they'd boast about it on TV about, you know, the tickets sold in 2 hours or something like that. That's not going to happen when you're charging like the obscene prices they're charging. The amount of people that can readily afford that, or who are at least willing to destroy their credit for the ability to afford that is limited. It's limited. It's not like in the days where it's $50 for a decent seat and then you sell out in an hour, you know? So, I mean, they have to they have to sort of like actually put some thought into it now. But yeah, as far as like it'll be a sellout and all that kind of stuff, however they have to do it from a creative standpoint, who knows? Like we may be looking at one of the weaker ones for sure coming up.
Certainly not rooting against any wrestling promotion success, but it does put fans in a position where, there's certainly part of me that wants this WrestleMania not to do as well. So they kind of sober up about what the demand is versus how they should be pricing the product. Because it's just untenable, when the average ticket price is $1,000 maybe to get in. I saw that for the Hall of Fame, premium seats are $6,000, something like that. I mean, it's absurd. It's just crazy. I don't know who they think they are, and I do think it is part of kind of like the UFC mentality where you get away from catering to families, and you just think this is like where the high rollers go, and it's the place to be seen. And just historically, that hasn't been the model for wrestling in America. So, I hope they wise up, and I'm happy to see them discounting tickets, and hopefully at some point there's a real evaluation of we pushed it too far, and the pricing would have been crazy at the peak of their success a couple of years ago, when the Bloodline was running hot and Cody was running hot. It's even crazier now when the product is kind of flat to say like, oh, you want to go see Raw at your local arena, the worst seats in the house are $400, something like that. Just nuts. Another point I wanted to raise, and I thought somewhat about this. I think another factor that is influencing their booking, and this is pretty troubling, is the partnership with Netflix and WWE Unreal. Now watching the last season and seeing how important it was to tell the stories behind the stories. I don't doubt that some of the decisions that they're making now are about being able to fill a season of Unreal saying, well, we had this plan on the whiteboard, and then we pivoted to this, and it sort of feels like they're kind of getting high on their own supply, and wanting the drama to be about the decision making behind the scenes rather than just give us like the best card. I don't know, maybe that's too conspiratorial, but I can see the episode or episodes of the next season of Unreal about the SmackDown main event side and all the twists and turns it took before wherever they get to.
I just still think it's a mistake still to be pulling the curtain back as far as they have been. I'm not delusional. It's not because I'm thinking, oh, everybody's going to know that it's not real now. I mean, I'm not, I get it. I understand. But by putting it in everyone's face that blatantly, when people try to get emotional about it and get excited, like what is to be gained from this? I mean, wrestling, no matter how much they try to pretend it is, it is not quite the same as a regular TV show or a movie. We all know that professional wrestling, WWE included, they do try a lot harder to convince you that what you're watching is real and genuine than movies and TV shows do. They just do. And I mean, like the characters are bleed over into real life. They're sort of bleeding over into the real people who play them. It's not like anything else. It's its own animal. They want you sitting there going like, whoa, did that really, whoa, what just happened? You're not doing that with TV shows and movies.
Yeah.
And so by making it so obvious, it almost feels like you lose some of that. I saw, it's not even just Unreal. They had this thing, it was a video that was posted of Shawn Michaels in NXT. I think I saw it just yesterday, where he's literally just standing there in the video going through all the beats with the wrestlers. Yeah. Do it this way, do it like that. And now you really want to build that anticipation and then turn and do that. And it's like, what are we doing? So now the show starts and I'm supposed to be all pumped up. Like, yeah, I know they're doing this, but you don't have to show it to me. Like,
Right.
what? Especially if you're someone that was never in the business and never, like, I've seen them do this. You know what I mean? But if you haven't, what does that do to you as a fan? You're just like, I feel like a sucker. You know? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, or all the podcasts, the Cody's podcast, the Undertaker's podcast, where that they promote in the middle of Raw or SmackDown, where Cody is sitting across from Gunther, and a conversation that is
that got me too. The Gunther thing, yes,
yeah, all the time where it is completely out of character conversation where they're talking about booking decisions and stuff like that, and yeah, for me, that's always been sort of like the whiplash thing. Is it's part of me can compartmentalize the two, but what's difficult is when in the middle of the show they are promoting Unreal or the Cody podcast, and it just
somebody pointed it out to me, and I think this is where the dividing line is, and this is where it makes sense to me. Yes, I mean these things are no real secrets, even if we don't know the nuts and bolts of it. The general sense of it is not a secret anymore. And to a certain degree, let's be honest, I mean, even 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, I mean, like the average person did not go, oh, yes, professional wrestling is a real sport. I mean, maybe a lot of the fans did, but the average guy on the street did not think that. But the difference is the wrestling company, and even today with all the podcasts, because people will go like all these podcasts criticizing wrestling breaking kayfabe, and they're breaking kayfabe on the podcast. But the thing is, they're not coming from the wrestling companies.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Busted Open is not WWE. The Jim Cornette Experience is not WWE. So it's like the wrestling companies never used to blink. No matter what you said, no matter what everybody tried to say, they were straight ahead, and they weren't doing like the whole like, yeah, we know, you're right, all right, but just have fun with it. Like, I think that's where things start to fall apart, is the company themselves should be, at least in their official capacity, like helping you to believe in the magic and suspend your disbelief with whatever they can control, rather than just saying, yeah, it's all nonsense, let's just have fun with it. Like that, I think hurts the viewing experience.
Yeah. Warren, what's your take on the shift? And I mean, to be curious, how do you think something like that would be received in Japan? Like an Unreal, a documentary series? Yeah.
Unthinkable. Because without saying kayfabe is not dead in Japan, there is a level of kayfabe that is still maintained. Like I've interviewed wrestlers in the past where with a liaison, in Japan, and they told me straight up, it's like, well, you have to ask them questions about what's going on, their storylines, their characters, and so on and so forth. Like you don't ask them about world-shattering, universe-shattering questions. You have to stay away from that. So no, it just would 100% not fly. It's still very guarded. There's promotions we don't even know who the booker is.
Yeah.
Like Stardom, everyone sort of assumes it's President Okada, not that Okada, it's another Okada, but people sort of assume it's him, but we're not even all that sure. No one knows who's booking All Japan.
Yeah.
It's like it's just stuff like that. People say Gedo, but apparently there's like 3 or 4 other people who are involved in the creative there. Okay. So it's a lot more hermetic. It quite frankly would not fly.
Yeah, and if there was a metric that WWE could point to that kind of pulling back the curtain, helping business somehow, it'd be one thing. And I guess you could point to sponsorships for Cody's podcasts and extra revenue from Netflix for Unreal. But I don't know that any of that stuff does anything to increase interest in the product. And maybe the opposite, because part of it is it's one thing for us to dissect their booking decisions and say they got this wrong and this guy should get a push or not. It's another thing for them to do it themselves. I mean, they had a whole episode about R-Truth being fired and then sort of them realizing like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that, and then making a deal with him. Yeah,
that's the thing, because like you say, you guys have been talking about who gets hype because of it. It's not, to me, it's not even just hype. It's that episode, Road Dogg just came across horribly in that R-Truth episode. Absolute 100%. And the thing is that they present this as, mask off, even though we all probably assume that it's still a bit of a work. It's a reality show. There's no, there's always scripting in reality shows, but nonetheless, it's presented to us as being mask off reality. So if Road Dogg is sitting there and, being kind of a jerk, and you're like, well, this guy isn't, I don't want to swear on the PWI podcast, but, he's one of those, and it's like, your opinion becomes much less favorable, especially since, the bits that they interviewed R-Truth in there, he's super down to earth and likable. And you're kind of like, R-Truth is kind of right, And
so look what happened. Look what happened with Chelsea Green and Michael Hayes.
Yeah, I mean, that's another great example.
Here's my view on that is Michael Hayes didn't say anything that is wrong. No. He didn't say anything that doesn't. No, really, that happens all the time. It's a reality of wrestling. He's 100% right. But you don't say that in a documentary.
These are conversations that need to be had. Yeah.
Her value is harmed by that, especially you're one of the decision makers. He should know better, unless these people are being pressured to say things like that. So again, it's like, what is being gained by this show? Getting some views on Netflix that they could get with a different show other than this show? I mean, nothing is being gained. It's only causing harm.
Yeah. Or similarly, spending weeks now building Gunther as this despicable heel who did committed the most evil sin of ending John Cena's career, to then put him across from Cody Rhodes to rehabilitate him essentially, and show him to be he's a good guy, nice guy. You end up liking the guy. So and what purpose did that serve?
Right. And Cody saying like, so who inspired your chops?
Yeah.
Like who? What?
Yeah.
Why should I care?
Yeah. I think it's a real mistake. And again, that's where I don't want to say you root for WWE to fail, but you do root for a correction, right? For them to realize that, one of two things, and maybe a little both, should happen. Like, if this is what you're going to offer, you got to change your prices because the demand's not going to be there. Or if you want to charge me that, you got to give me a much better product than this.
We want you to care less about this product, but pay more for it.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyhow, thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you both taking time. Before we run here, Warren, tell people where they could follow your stuff, the Mr. Warren Hayes podcast, and everything else.
Well, first of all, thank you both gentlemen for having me on. It's been an honor and a thrill to chat pro wrestling with you. I felt like I talked a lot, so hopefully you got your money's worth if we're paid by the word. But yes, the Mr. Warren Hayes Show is my weekly podcast that releases every Wednesday on youtube.com/Mr. Warren Hayes or on your favorite podcast application. I also stream multiple times a week on the YouTube channel, so if you want to join me for that, again, youtube.com/Mr. Warren Hayes. And if you want to if you want to just dip your toes into Warren Hayes stuff before going all in and listening to me, you can follow me on Blue Sky at MrWarrenHayes.show.
Excellent. And Brian, how's the book doing?
It's going really well. It's still in the top 10 wrestling books on Amazon, which, I'm very proud of. And as we talked about, it won the Observer Award. Second time I've done that for best book. I honestly didn't think it was going to happen this year with the big AEW coffee table book from the great Keith Greenberg. I thought that was going to be the one, but it's been doing great and it's still selling. And if people want signed copies, I'm selling those directly. Actually, still, I have some. They can get me at Brian R. Solomon at yahoo.com or just find me on social media. I'm Brian R. Solomon on Twitter. and we can do that. And it's going.
And you've
great.
got your own podcast that people.
Yes,
know
Shut
about.
Up and Wrestle with Brian R. Solomon. It's wrestling history is what the podcast is about. Different guests every week. I'm doing a series on the NWA World Champions, and I just had the great historian Tony Richards on to talk about Dory Funk Jr. That's actually this week's episode. So that I've just passed 4 years doing that show, which I can't believe. Wow. So I encourage people to check it out. And non-wrestling, the last 2 weeks, I got to be a guest on the Fun for All Ages podcast with Frank Santopadre, which is a great pop culture podcast that gets way more listens than my podcast does. So I encourage people to check that out too.
Yeah. And then obviously your contributions to the magazine, you got your 2 columns, one on Terry Funk, right? The NWA, winning the NWA world title, and
that's right.
Other on Trick Williams, two names that you wouldn't expect to.
Well, I don't just look at the past. So yeah, in the lockup column, which is like my present day pro wrestling column, I talk about Trick Williams and his upside as a major star. And in the way it was, I got to talk about Harley Race winning the NWA world title from Terry Funk at Maple Leaf Gardens in 1977, which I had wanted to write about for the longest time because there was a column years ago in the Wrestler magazine back in the 90s where Matt Brock talked about that match. And it was one of the columns that got me, even though that got me interested in wrestling history, like just wanting to know more about these matches from years ago and these big stars and things. So it was like a full circle thing for me now to get to write about that match.
I hope you took the time to thank Mr. Brock.
Oh, I did more than thank him. A few months ago, I interviewed him in my column. I tracked him down to his retirement community in Florida, and we had a long conversation.
Yeah, not to launch into a whole other thing, but because we just brought him up, Trick Williams, one of like the bright spots, right? For everything that yes. We're talking about that WWE has gotten wrong, one thing they very much have gotten right in the last few weeks has been Trick Williams, and
right out of the gate.
Right, I mean, put him right at the top. I mean, they do him in the Elimination Chamber in the world title mix, and completely been accepted by fans, right? I mean,
I know you're trying to wrap this up, but the thing, but what's wild about it is now I hate to put it this way because it's like you praise somebody and you put somebody else down. I mean, look at him and Carmelo Hayes. It's wild because in NXT, Carmelo Hayes was the main guy and Trick was like his henchman. And now it's so far from that, but it speaks to like, he's ready. There's a moment where somebody's just ready and he's ready. I don't think he was ready back then. He's ready now.
I think also, for better for worse, there is an issue of size, right? And yes. Trick Williams gets out there and he can look eye to eye with Randy Orton. He looks every bit the Vince McMahon model of a main event, a star, whatever he is, 6'5", 6'6", chiseled, good looking.
But it's that thing in NXT where it doesn't seem to matter as much. Look at
if anything, it's a hindrance in NXT, right? Because it's sort of Carmelo got more of that sort of credibility for being the undersized worker, but then you come over to the main rosters and you just look kind of small, and
look at what happened to poor Gargano and Ciampa. The second they were like NXT icons, legends, the second they brought them out, it was like, oh my God, it's over. It's over. It's gone.
Right.
Instantly. It was like,
and with Trick, what he was fighting against the whole time in NXT was that his work wasn't quite at the level of his peers in NXT.
Right.
And that was kind of a shortcoming for him. He constantly sort of being criticized for not being as polished, and he comes over to the main roster. It's really fascinating. It's like it does show you that what works in one doesn't necessarily translate to the other. And if anything, I think the takeaway is, they could have brought Trick over a lot earlier. Like he was probably ready for this years ago. So anyhow. All right, guys. Thank you so much. One last plug. Pick up the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, PWI-online.com. We've got all kinds of coverage of New Japan, CM Punk. Plus, in here, you could learn more about signing up for the weekly PWI newsletter. So much more. Back issue bundles. Head on over to PWI-online.com. www.wrestlingobserver.com. Thank you, gentlemen, and we will see you all soon.